Thank you. Been around the block a few times in the Salesforce ecosystem, but with IBM, it's fairly new. Bluewolf, if you're not familiar, is an organization that has kind of grown up in the Salesforce ecosystem. And we are now, this month, celebrating a 1-year anniversary as part of IBM. So the acquisition took place last May. So some of this content actually is just developed and somewhat new, so I'm going to have some notes here. But I am here to talk about AI and the future of selling, and I manage our global sales and alliances organization. You just came back from your breakouts, probably had a nice lunch, and I've got some bad news for you. Unfortunately, you're all fired. But I'm fired as well. AI is coming to take our jobs. If you look at one industry, retail, just in the last 7 months, 90,000 jobs have been eliminated in retail. So what's happening? Let's just look at Amazon, for example. Amazon is eating retailers' lunch, literally. They are doing it online and now looking to do it in brick and mortar. How many have heard, just show of hands, know Amazon Go? Familiar with Amazon Go? So Amazon Go is looking to be the Uber of grocery stores. Basically what you'll do is you'll walk into an Amazon Go retail store with your cell phone, you'll swipe your phone, it'll know who you are, you go grab your groceries, put them in your cart, and you walk out. No lines, no checkout. Everything will be put on your Amazon Prime account, you'll see what you purchased, when you purchased. So this technology, Amazon has created a label for it. They're calling just walkout technology. They want to change how retail thinks about using technologies like AI, like machine learning, like visualization around computing, mobile technologies. You may be saying, well, that's retail, and we've got white-collar jobs. We're potentially immune to this. What's interesting is that we are now working with organizations across all industries. Healthcare, life sciences, retail, automotive. All these organizations are coming to us and looking and asking about how can AI make their selling organization more efficient? How can we connect with customers in a new, more meaningful way? One organization we're working with in healthcare and life sciences is introducing chatbots. So their online channel for chat will now be Watson. And Watson now will help that service agent. They're going to take the burden off the service agent for answering chats and allow those service agents now to focus on higher value, more difficult customer interactions. So that's an example of AI working with humans to create a better outcome. So the first example of Amazon is scary, and you think, okay, well, is it man versus the machines, and is the Terminator coming, and Skynet, and all of that? We believe more in the second example, where machine and man are working together in what we call augmented intelligence, where man and machine is helping create a new and unique experience. So what does this mean for selling organizations, and what does this technology look like? Today in selling organizations, you're capturing a ton of data about your customers, but we're serving it up to our sellers to make them try and figure out and make sense of all of this information. What we say to our sellers is, here you go, here's a new dashboard, here's a new report. Can you figure out insight? Can you figure out what's going on here? What AI will do is now make sense of that data, present that to a seller so that they can take action. Take the heavy lifting out of sifting through organizations' databases and information and CRM and putting the burden on the seller it's creating a partnership with these AI technologies to create that better outcome. So that's great for organizations that are going to leverage technology, these next generation selling organizations. But what do customers expect when they're working with an organization that's going to leverage an AI technology? And I would say that they are already expecting it. Your customer's last experience with an Amazon or an Uber is that bar is now what they expect when they interact with your organization. So how do I start this journey around becoming this next generation selling organization, leveraging AI? We believe you need to put the customer at the heart of your strategy. You've got the data, as I mentioned. There's no lack of information. You need to now use that information to create and deliver the exceptional customer experience. So this is the shameless plug. Our CEO, my boss, wrote this book. Please come by the booth, pick up your copy of the book, and learn how you can start incorporating these strategies around customer obsession into your organization. That's it. That's the last plug. So now that we have all this data, we have all this information, that data alone doesn't inspire people to action. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings, but the reality is 95% of our decisions are driven off of emotion. And then we come back to being rational to justify making a decision based on emotion. People don't make decisions just based off of data, knowing that they had a customer service issue doesn't mean that customer is going to be compelled to act. So AI alone is not going to sell or deliver an experience to your customer. Empathy will be key. Knowing and understanding your customer, living in your customer's shoes, will be critical. We, in fact, have been teaching our organization, our sellers, about storytelling. So yes, we can serve up some data and some insight to our sellers, but how do they now weave that into a story that's compelling in front of the customer that then drives that customer, hopefully, into action? So your customer is on a journey with your organization, and they're leaving kind of breadcrumbs throughout that journey. So they may be calling into the contact center, they're paying their invoices, they're having a sales meeting with your sellers, they're attending a trade show. Some of those experiences are good, and some may not be so good. At Bluewolf, we like to say no one owns the customer, but someone always owns that customer moment. So it's critical now that as insights are gathered throughout that customer journey, and AI is going to help gather that data, bring it together, and serve it up to the seller, at that moment of truth, is your seller prepared to act in a way that's going to be empathetic to the customer and, again, compel that customer to act? I'm going to give you a customer example. Susan Maui heads up business operations and sales operations for AmerisourceBergen. How many people are familiar with Amerisource? A few. Amerisource is one of the largest pharmaceutical distributors in the world today. They're a $130 billion organization, the Fortune 50 company, and they distribute pharmaceuticals and healthcare supplies to hospitals, retail outlets like CVS. So Susan and her team log in the morning, and they see this beautiful dashboard, and it shows there's $150 million, $149 million of pipeline, renewals pipeline. But there in red, in kind of the lower right-hand corner, we see 17.3 million of that pipeline is at risk. And so AI and all of the data that's in our corporate systems is being served up to come up with a dashboard that brings us this insight. But what we see is now an alert to one of Susan's sellers that says, hey, despite Q4 revenue at the Mayo Clinic increasing, the data is telling us this customer's at risk. This customer's at risk of not renewing and remaining a customer with Amerisource. So I click in, so Susan Sellers clicks in, and let's see what's happening at the account level. And there's a risk assessment. It's talking about the Mayo Clinic, and it says, hey, you know what? Average pricing is 10% more than Mayo Clinic's peers. They've contacted the contact center numerous times in the last 60 days, and some of that sentiment has been customers actually angry. And lastly, we know that their renewal is coming up, and it's coming up soon, and they haven't signed it. So all these things are happening, and we know that if the data's saying, hey, all this stuff is happening, there's a very high likelihood that the Mayo Clinic is not going to renew. So the data's great, but now what are we going to do? What's the call to action? So what you're seeing here is a remediation plan. On the left-hand side, there's been shipments that have been late. Let's work with the distribution center and come up with a plan so we can monitor and track shipments to make sure that shipments to the Mayo Clinic are on time. In the middle, you see we're going to alert finance and work with finance to make sure that we've got a contract and pricing scheme with the Mayo Clinic that brings them at par with their peers. So worked with finance and came up with a rebate, 5.5% rebate based on volume pricing to make sure we can satisfy this issue. And then lastly, customer care gets involved, and let's have a dedicated care person to work with the sales rep to make sure that we've got everybody rallying around this account. So this is great. We've got the data, we've got an action plan, we've got people rallied around this, but again, who's going to own the moment? It's not enough for the customer for you to say, you know what, I know your shipments have been late and pricing's a little out of whack. Right? Somebody's got to go have that conversation, be able to understand meet that customer at that moment. You know, how are they feeling? What's truly going on with that customer in order to move that relationship forward or risk losing it altogether. So I thought that was a neat example of a customer leveraging these technologies. So what does your day look like today? You know, are you spending an inordinate amount of time trying to sift through data and make sense of what's going on, only to really, you know, have ineffective calls with, you know, the 20% of customers that are the least profitable in your organization? AI integrated into your organization is about focusing that effort on the 20% of customers that are driving, on average, most of the profit in your organization. But those 20%, again, are going to be the organizations that expect a unique, differentiated experience. They're going to expect that your customers or your sellers can engage with them in new ways. This is a wonky slide, but then I know this is a selling audience, but we're technologists as well. This is a framework for AI. And the idea here is on the far right is kind of the example with Amerisource Bergen, that I've learned all this information about my customer and now I can engage in action. Most organizations start over on the far left here, which is just capturing data from CRM, from your operational systems, so that you can just start to make some predictions. Which are the leads that I need to follow up that are going to convert? Which opportunities have the highest likelihood of closing or falling out of the pipeline? And in the middle, we're making that data consumable so we can change behavior and take action. So my example around the chatbot, let's automate some of these more routine tasks into systems like AI. So that's the technology framework, and that's important. but what's more important is how will these changes, how will these technologies impact your selling culture? And we think that there is a big impact. We think you need to start rethinking how you're organizing that culture and how you're cultivating that culture in this new world. So the AmerisourceBergen example was, yes, we have data, but now we're introducing new processes across the organization. So we might be bringing people together in the organization that have never really interacted before. So these new strategies are going to require creativity and not just sticking with the status quo. The enablement strategy of your sellers is going to have to change. I talked about this idea of empathy and the ability to tell a story at that right moment will be critical for moving the needle. So you'll be armed with data, and rigid methodologies of the past are not going to fit. That's also going to change the way we have to think about how are we looking for talent in the marketplace. The Amazon example is a great example of how we're all now, our expectations are different in terms of how we engage with organizations. So we'll have to maybe look for talent that's more empathetic, ability to weave a tale, versus some traditional hiring metrics that may be focused on things like the ability to do prospecting and outbound cold calling. So I hope I've left you with the idea that AI isn't coming to take all of our selling jobs. But now more than ever before is your sellers will have to be the personification of your brand. So customers who feel connected to a brand, much more likely to recommend and purchase from that brand. They're 5 times more likely to stand up for it. So as you think about AI, stand up for AI, stand up for your brand, leverage these technologies in the organization. We are helping companies every day think about how they can take that next step to becoming the next generation selling organization that leverages AI. We have a blueprint that helps and kind of maps out that journey around how you're leveraging technology, people, and process. It's on our website. Come by the booth, pick up your book, and thank you very much for your time today.